Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Mary Badham played the original Scout Finch in the 1962 Hollywood classic To Kill a Mockingbird. And she returns in a different role as the Broadway version opens at the Kennedy Center starting today in Washington, D.C. I spoke to Badham about the play and her childhood memories of the movie set, from Gregory Peck becoming her real-life father figure to visiting Harper Lee in the nursing home, and the enduring power of lines like "Hey Boo" and "Hey Mr. Cunningham." Mary Badham, hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP. This is an honor.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
We're talking because you are starring in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird at the Kennedy Center, June 21st through July 10th. And it's just so amazing to chat with you because, of course, you played the original Scout in the original 1962 film To Kill a Mockingbird, along with Gregory Peck. There's so much I want to ask you, memories about the movie, but we got to start with the Kennedy Center because that's the newest thing. So obviously you're not playing Scout this time. What role are you playing in this time around?
I'm playing Mrs. Duvall.
All right. And what's it like playing, not only playing that role, but also, looking across the stage and seeing another child actor, playing the role that you made famous?
Well, it's been a lot of fun. It really has. It's been a real learning experience for me. Theater is something totally new to me. And of course, Melanie Moore playing Scout, she is just brilliant. She's absolutely perfect. And I couldn't be more pleased with the whole entire cast. They've just been so magnificent.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of which, we gotta mention that the legendary role of Atticus Finch is played by Richard Thomas, of course, John Boy from the Waltons. He was just recently in Ozark. We interviewed him a couple years ago when he was at the Kennedy Center, I think for, what was it, The Humans maybe? But anyway, so he's leading this national tour. Obviously, I guess it was Jeff Daniels played it on Broadway, but just talk about what, Richard Thomas in this thing. I mean, is it amazing watching him do it night in and night out?
It is. He is so brilliant with it. And he would have been my first choice for an Atticus because I just feel like he embodies all of that. And he just has done a perfect job with it. Audience have been wonderful with their reception of what we're giving them. And I just have had a lot of fun with it.
Definitely. And we need to remind everybody, this is the new, the stage adaptation that I guess Aaron Sorkin adapted it from, Horton Foote wrote the movie screenplay, of course, from Harper Lee's novel, but Aaron Sorkin sort of brought it to stage a couple years ago on Broadway with Tony-winning director Bart Sher. So where does this fall? I mean, obviously you weren't in the Broadway production, right? But you joined on with the national tour. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to see the Broadway production and was just totally overwhelmed by it. It was so brilliantly done. And of course, Aaron is just, he's a magnificent writer. He's just incredible. And never thought to be part of it at all. And then they called and kept asking, about doing it. And I didn't think it would happen. I was totally unsure about doing the part and had to consider long and hard doing it because it is such a different role for me. But we finally met in New York and did the rehearsals, and they seemed to be pleased with my take on Mrs. Dubose, and here I am.
Here you are touring the country, and we can't wait for it to stop in DC at the Kennedy Center. Such an iconic building too. So it's going to be awesome having this powerful story there. Well, without further ado, our listeners are, they're dying to hear, your memories of, your famous child role. I mean, we all know Scout. We've watched Scout. We probably all saw it first, in school or something, but I've seen the movie a million times and I love it so much, but I would love to hear some memories. I'll try to divide it up for you to keep it organized. So we'll get to Gregory Peck and Duvall and them in a second. But first, off the bat, I want to know about you and your fellow, the camaraderie with your fellow child stars. You had Philip Alford as Jem and John as Dill, John Megna, I think how you say it.
John Megna, yep.
What was it like? I mean, you guys kind of grew up together on set, but what was it like just, the camaraderie with the three of you guys as child stars, just figuring this thing out?
Oh, well, we just did our scenes day by day, and we really, it was John and Philip against me. You got these two guys and they're wanting to play and do their thing, and here's this girl that's, trying to get in on the stuff. And we had that push-pull kind of relationship that like brothers and sisters have. So it played very well on film because evidently, according to Philip, we would have these knockdown, drag-out fights. But
fighting like
I don't
real brothers
really remember those.
Fighting like brothers and sisters.
Yeah, and it was, but overall, it was so much fun doing it because it was playtime. It wasn't like work. It was just play.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And speaking of you two, you three playing and just it's coming of age stuff. But was that Ham, the Halloween costume at the end, with Bob Buell's knife and all that stuff? Was that Ham really heavy and hard to act in?
Well, it was made out of chicken wire and paper mache, and they Whitey, our set manager, made it, and I remember we had a press thing, like I was supposed to be helping paint it or something. Of course, it was all done by the time I got there, but Whitey wanted to try it on me to make sure it would fit okay, and when he did, of course, it went right down, and I couldn't see out the eye port, so he had to rig up a harness in there, and it was so wide it was a little difficult to maneuver around in it very easily, but we managed, and it was fun.
Oh yeah, so you're saying it was a bad ham, Mary Badham?
Yeah. Good one.
That's
Sharp.
Good. Yeah, I don't know. Thanks for the courtesy laugh. It wasn't that good. But an iconic scene. All right, well, I have to know about working with Gregory Peck. I mean, Atticus Finch. I think the American Film Institute named him the #1 movie hero of all time, beat out Indiana Jones, and all that stuff. But I mean, do you agree? I mean, do you agree that that lawyer, the weight of the role that he plays? I mean, do you agree that Gregory as Atticus Finch is, as good as it gets?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what you saw up on screen is what we got at home, because I would go home with the Pecks on the weekend, and we became very, very close. And stayed friends right up until he passed. And he was an Atticus. I mean, he really was. He was just so kind and generous and so intelligent and well-read, and just a real, very good role model for me. I lost my parents very early in my life. My mother died 3 weeks after I graduated from high school, and Daddy died like 2 years after I got married. So I was only I was 21 when I got married. So it really was great because he would take the time to pick up the phone and call me and say, how you doing, kiddo? What's going on? And if he was going to be someplace close, he would send me a ticket or send a car to pick me up and join him for things. And whenever I was in Los Angeles, I'd go out to their house, and it was a very close relationship. He and Veronique really picked up where Mother and Daddy left off, and they were very supportive and helpful in guiding me through my life, along with Brock Peters, who played Tom Robinson. Brock and I did a symphony program together with Gary Gackstetter and his symphony in Kansas, where they played some pieces of music, and then between the pieces of music, we would tell a little behind-the-scenes story, not retelling Mockingbird, but just things that happened off scene, off camera. And so I tell people I had reverse Oreo daddies, because I had my daddy, and I had Gregory Peck, and I had Brock Peters. And those three guys were my male role models. They were absolutely brilliant.
That's so cool that you stayed in touch with all of them, and the whole father figures, or just these mentors to guide you through life. That's so fantastic. Can you actually remember shooting that famous scene, sitting on that porch swing with Gregory Peck, when he's saying the famous you never understand a person until you get in their skin and walk around it for a while? Can you actually remember shooting that scene?
Yeah, I remember it. I remember it very well. We had such a hard time. I was having trouble crying because I was so happy, and it was just fun. And here I have to have this very serious scene. It was difficult. I had to really figure out how to do that.
Wow. Yeah, it's all-time stuff. Well, I mean, we mentioned Gregory Peck and you mentioned Brock Peters, but we got to mention Robert Duvall as Boo Radley, because it was his very first role. I mean, Gregory Peck had done other stuff. He was a star, Roman Holiday, etc. But for Robert Duvall, that was his first screen role. And so just talk about that, working with him in that final scene where, your famous line, "Hey, Boo," and, sort of realizing he's not the boogeyman that you thought all along. But, what was Robert Duvall like, as a young actor, working with him?
Well, we really didn't get to know each other. I mean, we only shot that one day together. One of the brilliant things that Bob Mulligan, our director, did was we never saw anyone out of character until they were all done shooting. We never saw them out of costume. So I was leaving the set to go to the schoolroom, and there's this guy sitting on a bunch of pallets by the back door, and he goes, "Aren't you going to say hey to Boo?" I had no idea who he was because he was totally out of costume.
Right. That's hilarious. And then, then you go on to see him, smell napalm in the morning, and The Godfather and all this stuff. And you're like, hey, there's that guy that I didn't even recognize.
That's he was, and now he lives like 2 hours away from me on a farm, and
he's here in Virginia,
wife,
near here.
Yeah, he's in Virginia, and he and his wife have a foundation that they've started. His wife is from South America, and they've started a foundation for children, and it's really wonderful. They've done some really good work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that scene with Boo, we mentioned, everyone talks about the famous line, "Hey, Boo," and it is a powerful line. It's, we realize, not to judge a book by its cover, he's not this scary recluse, but to me, the even more equally powerful line is when you get to say it, is out at the courthouse, when you say, "Hey, Mr. Cunningham," and suddenly the guy with the pitchforks, which, I've seen in some productions, they're in KKK hoods, and in the movie it's just pitchforks. But, talk about how powerful of a moment that is, where just the innocence of a child just totally disarms this guy and actually makes him ashamed of what he's doing.
Well, it's making them think and realize, when you put a group of people together in a mob, they lose their individuality and they don't hold true to their real beliefs. And what Scout does is she makes them remember their humanity and their individuality, and she changes that dynamic to where they back off. And this is something that I think is one of the most powerful pieces of the film, because it's a good life lesson.
Absolutely.
When you get group collective thinking, it's not always correct.
Right. It's so just to disarm, like that, like you said, the mob mentality. And I don't want to make it too political, but it could apply to storming the Capitol on January 6th or whatever.
Exactly.
Name an example. I mean, if we had a scout just to say, hey, Mr. Cunningham, maybe you wouldn't be storming into buildings and violent stuff like that.
I think that's why. I mean, my goal with going with this play and having the play happen is very important to our country, to remind us of who we are and what we want for our country. And that we have to love one another and we have to take care of one another. We have to educate our people. That's very important. And to remember that people are individuals. No two people have had the same experiences. They have not had the same values. So we have to take them as an individual, right, and lift them up. And that's what I hope for this, is that we can join our country together and make it stronger and better and happier. I want America to be a loving, happy country that cares about its individual people, and that we all, and it's like a marriage, you have to work at it every day. You have to try to make things better, even when times are very tough, and go back to our basics. And it's not easy, and we've had a lot of families ripped apart lately for various reasons, and we need to try and collectively work to make it a better place.
I agree with you entirely. It's that's the goal every day for me too. Let's try to bring everyone together. Like you're saying, I know people of all different walks of life, and I think basically most people at their core are good people. I just think that different life experiences, and I feel like there's a lot of talking past each other a lot of times. And so hopefully this show helps bring people together.
And we just have to, there's to me, education is so important. And I say this with the kids when I go into the school, is education is the key to freedom.
Yeah.
And ignorance, to me, is the root of all evil.
It is.
I truly, truly believe that. So we need to really work on educating our children, and parents, I ask them to please take time to work with your children, read to them from a very early age. If you start reading to your children early, that will be a lifelong thing that they'll carry with them and pass on.
Right. Yeah, reading is such
a
good
bonding. is so important. That you can't ever get those years back where you read to your children and tell stories and stuff. That's so valuable in
Oh
so
yeah.
many ways.
And that is part of the legacy of To Kill a Mockingbird. The novel. It is such a seminal partly because it's that coming of age, novel, but it's a novel that's perfect for kids to read. I mean, I remember reading it. I'm sure everybody does. They pick it up and read it at a young age. It helps them get into reading. And by the end of the book, they're dealing with some mature stuff. At the beginning, it's just coming of age, playing out in the street with your friends. And by the end, it's really the most heavy social commentary themes, political stuff that you could deal with. So talk about when did you discover the novel? Because, unlike us who, read it in a class and probably watched the movie at the same time, the book was only out, like 2 years before the movie came out. So did you even get a chance to read it? Were you old enough to read it? Or what was that experience for you with Lee?
No, I knew nothing about the book. I knew nothing about the whole piece because I don't even think we got complete scripts.
Right.
And the reason being that in that day and time, there were subjects and that were deemed inappropriate for females and children. And I'm not sure that's not a half bad way of thinking about things today, but there were words that were used that they felt were not good for us to hear. So the trial scene, all of that, I never was exposed to any of that. I knew nothing about that.
Right.
And it wasn't until I saw the film that I saw the complete story and what it was about.
Right.
And I just remember sitting there in the theater in tears, just totally awestruck
Right.
by,
When they say
by what happened.
Miss Jean Louise, stand up. Your father's passing. When you're acting it, it probably means one thing, but when you actually watch it in the context of the movie after they lost this important court case, I mean, as a movie, it is movies as a verb. It moves you, that scene for sure.
Yes, it was very good and very powerful. And I can remember I guess it was the AFI Awards, and I took my daughter with me, and I told her, I said, I need you to go out to the lobby and bring me a stack of napkins. And I showed her, like a 10-inch stack of napkins. She's like, oh, what do you want with this? I'm like, just go get the napkins. Because I was sitting next to Brock Peters, and the Pecks were behind us, and I knew that I was going to cry. Well, the whole audience cried. Oh my God. In that scene, it's just, you could hear. It was so emotional for everyone in that room. It was amazing.
Yeah, you should have passed napkins out to the whole crowd.
Well, we went through that and more, let me tell you.
Oh wow. Well, part of it too is that Elmer Bernstein music, that just tugs at your heartstrings. It is just it's iconic. Well, real quick, did you ever double back and read the novel after, or did you just ride with the film and you say, I'm good?
I didn't read the novel until my daughter was I think about 2 years old, and Professor Inge from the college called and said, would you please come and talk to my English lit class? And I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to talk to this English lit class about, but okay. So he said, well, let's meet for lunch and talk about how we're going to do this. Okay, so we meet for lunch, and before I even get seated, he's like, so what was your favorite part of the book? I was like, and I guess he could tell by the look on my face I had not read the book. Young lady, your first assignment is you go home and you read this book. Yes, sir. So I did. And here were all these characters that I knew nothing about. And it really gave me a more complete view of the story.
Yeah.
It was quite an education.
Oh yeah, and
So
crazy to think that it was Harper Lee's only novel. Well, they say that she might have contributed to Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, like helped him write that. Which I know Dill character is sort of a stand-in for Capote in a lot of ways. But did you ever stay in touch with Harper Lee? Did you ever get to meet her?
oh yeah, she came on the set. She was supposed to stay for like 3 weeks. She ended up spending like I think a week or a little bit more. I mean, filming is very boring to watch it in process unless you're actively working in it. It's pretty boring to watch.
Yeah.
And after about a week, she was ready to leave and go back to New York. So, but yeah, we met there and we did some press together. And I used to go to Monroeville once a year for the play that they do there, that they performed in Israel and in front of Congress. And Miss Nell, I knew where she lived, and I went by there one time, and she had a car there from out of town, and so I thought, well, she's got company. I'm not going to bother. And then over the next few years, I wasn't able to go. But then the next time I saw her was after she had gone into the nursing home, and her minister, Reverend Butts, was going over to go visit her, and he said, well, why don't you ride along? So I did, and I said, Miss Nell, I'm so sorry, about not coming to visit you, but I didn't want to disturb you. And she goes, young lady, don't you ever come by here that you don't come by and say hey to me. Yes, ma'am, okay.
That's what Harper Lee said?
That's what she said.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, at least you got to go see her, before she passed. That's amazing. Yeah. I was disheartened, and I don't want to sidetrack too much on this, but I was sad to see, the late in life with the whole should they publish that, what was it, Go Set a Watchman or whatever. And it was like it turned out to be like a first draft, and then she changed a bunch of the characters, and it almost seemed like she didn't really want it released, but who knows whether the estate, afterlife or whatever,
I don't know about any of that. I can't really comment on any of that.
Yeah. I'm glad we got Mockingbird as it was, and not what came out later.
I think so. I think it's an interesting study for a writing class,
right,
to show how an author goes through the push and pull of characters and storyline, and then hones it down into what we have now. I think it's valuable in that sense.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I guess you've been really generous with your time. Thanks. I didn't know we'd even get to talk this long. I appreciate it. I guess sort of in closing before we bring it back to the Kennedy Center, but just big picture, the legacy and the power of and how much it changed. It literally changed history. To Kill a Mockingbird, the 1960 novel and the 1962 film. I mean, that they came out before. I mean, the I Have a Dream speech was 1963. These things came out even before that, to just kind of show where society was, and civil rights movement and stuff. Just talk about sort of the legacy of it. I mean, I know with anything that was made that many decades ago, we can always, pick holes in it from, now looking back, oh, is Atticus a white savior, et cetera, et cetera. We can pick holes, from our current context now. But I always try to remind people, like, you need to judge where it was at the time. I mean, we would not be where we are today and be able to even have these, very ultra progressive conversations looking back on it. We wouldn't even be at this point without the earth-shattering thing that Mockingbird did in the early 60s. So I guess just talking in terms of, how much you really think it changed society for the better.
Well, I think it was a very good educational tool, in the fact that it was told from a child's point of view. And that was very intentional. And that it allowed us to talk about subjects that were known but not discussed openly. And And this allowed us to go through those different subject matter and topics to where we could have rational discussions about them and digest it on our own individual level in order to discuss it further and to make inroads into making things better. And I think that's kind of where we are today. I mean, we're still learning these lessons. We're still having, I never would have dreamed that we would be where we are now, that we would have to still be having this discussion in 2022. I'm just totally blown away by what's happened in the last 4 years, 6 years. And this, I am hoping, will be the balm to heal our country again. We keep having to do this again.
I know. It's so true. We all thought, maybe naively at the time, first Black president, post-racial society, but then how many years after that? Here we are. We feel, it seems like we keep taking one step forward, 3 steps back, and so we need this bomb. We need this bomb To Kill a Mockingbird coming to the Kennedy Center and all the towns around the country. Thank you for providing that bomb. I guess just sort of, before we run, catch us up on, what all you've done since that movie, and what brought you from there to Kennedy Center. Cause this is one of your first time. You said acting on stage was sort of like this thing, new to you. I know. I guess you did maybe an episode of The Twilight Zone or something, but for the most part, you kind of did a Harper Lee. You kind of stayed away for a while, but, remind us, when did you actually get back into acting and do this thing for the Kennedy Center?
Well, I've done films and TV shows scattered throughout. I mean, you guys can probably look up the biography. I don't really think about it that much.
Right.
Different things have come up, but I've been busy with Mockingbird through the years, just, going to high schools, colleges, and universities, and book clubs and women's clubs and all that. So that has really never gone away, but my main role now is just being grandma and, working on the farm, and then this. And now I'll be gone for 1.5 years. So it's been quite a switch in my life to go from working on the farm to this.
Oh, absolutely. And then do you ever have any, sibling rivalry of, because your brother John made Saturday Night Fever and War Games and Short Circuit and all this stuff, but
his line of work goes from here down to the end of this building. I mean, it's just, he's done so much. John is certified genius, brilliant guy who, that's all he ever wanted to do, was to be in film and theater. That was his goal, was to do that. And he studied at Yale and was there working hard and beating his brains out trying to, make it through. And he gets a call from my mother, baby sister's going to be in a movie. And he's like, what?
He's like, that's what I want to do. And she gets to go in it at a young age.
Right. And then fast forward, baby sister's been nominated for an Academy Award. And I don't think he's ever forgiven me for that.
Right. You probably had to be one of the, to this day, probably one of the, youngest nominees ever. I mean, there's only, there's a short list of, the child stars that get nominated. So that must have been really cool. And it just speaks to the legacy that you'll always hold a place in our collective, consciousness as Scout. It's pretty incredible. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You've been really generous with your time, and it's great hearing all the memories and everything. But we want to encourage everyone to come see you in the newest production of To Kill a Mockingbird. It's going to be at the Kennedy Center here in the nation's capital, June 21st through July 10th. Thanks so much for joining us. This was fantastic.
You're welcome. I think we've gotten enough for two pieces.
Oh, well, I like going long because I can post the full thing as on a podcast. But yes, I'll chop it up and take the best highlights for the radio. Don't worry.
Great. Well, I can't wait to get home. I'm real excited. And please, y'all come because it's a fun evening out.
Definitely. Final seconds. Can we have you say one of your iconic lines? Either "Hey, Mr. Cunningham" or "Hey, Boo"?
Hey, Boo.
Hey, Scout. All right. We'll leave it at that. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Stay well.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.